Hello, whoever's currently in charge of Warner Brothers. I am Nando, the YouTuber who secretly writes all the Marvel movies. I'm sure you've seen the news. Got a lot of cool things that we announced at Comic-Con. MODOK is going to be the villain of Ant-Man 3. War Machine is going to be on the Skrull Show. And very excited about this, the Wrecking Crew are in a Daredevil-adjacent, street-level heroes kind of show. So we are doing so many great things. I've been looking to branch out, and what luck, because I saw your note and color me intrigued. Dear Nando, we saw how great all the Marvel stuff is and we need your help. Luckily, we have a bunch of free time because our big franchise-wide reset movie got delayed for no reason. So, we want to start looking at some sequels. Do you have a fun idea for The Batman 2? Signed, the current WB guy. I appreciate your candor, and it just so happens that yes, I do have a fun idea for a The Batman sequel, and I would love to share it with you, and only you. So do not share this video with anybody, otherwise you'll have to have someone else write it, and it will probably be a fantastic story, but it'll be different from this one, and you'll have to pretend you haven't seen this video, so let's try to avoid that. But before we get to the pitch, I do want to talk about 3 characters that I've seen fans talking about. They seem to believe they should be in the sequel. So I want to tell you why none of them are in my pitch. First, this one's easy. Every time I bring up Batman sequels, I hear Court of Owls suggested as a potential plot point. And if you don't know, the Court of Owls is a secret society that's pulling all the strings in Gotham. They wear owl masks and have an operative they call Talon. Here's the thing. We just got done with a movie about Batman unraveling the massive conspiracy that ties together political power, law enforcement, and organized crime, who secretly control all of Gotham. I know Paul Dano said it in an interview once, bless his heart, but what is there left for Batman to discover? I want to tread new ground. Second one, a little trickier. Robin. I do not hate Robin. I think he is a great character. All of them are. But let's say we're specifically talking about Dick Grayson. I've heard the argument that they should do Robin in these, because why not? Robin is cool. And I'm sure we can come up with a clever way to fit him into the bigger picture. I don't disagree. However, I think Robin feels like a movie 3 beat. Batman is just getting started. He's finding himself. In the end of this last movie, he just learned that he cannot save the city by being vengeance. He needs to be something more. So let's prove that out. Take a movie to test that theory. And then when Batman thinks he's got it all together, boom, a kid. I certainly would not be surprised if this movie ends with Bruce Wayne going to a circus or something like that, but I don't think it's time for Robin yet. And the last one, the tough one. Mr. Freeze is a very popular choice to lead this movie. It is all the fan art, all the fan casting, and I've been trying to figure out why. Here's where I'm at. Number 1, Heart of Ice is a great episode of the animated series, which, listen, it is. And it's an interesting characterization for Freeze. The near robotic delivery of Michael Anasara's Freeze felt like the first time that character had been taken seriously, and while Mr. Freeze had been around since 1959, it wasn't until Heart of Ice that the backstory we all know and love was born. Victor Freeze was a scientist working on a cure for his wife Nora's terminal illness, and to preserve her health, Nora was frozen in suspended animation. And it's clever, so I appreciate the fans' insistence on bringing that to the silver screen. The character vibe fits with what Reeves has established in the Batman so far, so why not? Especially because, number 2, Arnold, while fun, was not a great interpretation of this character. While, yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger's version of the character from 1997's Batman and Robin is technically a smidge closer to the animated series Mr. Freeze that we all loved, his performance was far from the cold and calculating monster that made that version of the character work. And am I saying it was bad? Not really. It was campy and silly and clearly what they were going for. But a new take on the character, one that's more grounded and serious, would still feel fresh, even though we got a memorable portrayal of the character not too long ago. And he's really one of the only on-screen Batman villains without a beloved, iconic performance, so he would feel fresh. The right actor could make Mr. Freeze their own in a way that someone trying to reinvent, say, the Joker or Bane probably could not. Because number 3, Mr. Freeze is one of the higher profile villains that this series has not touched, and also has not been done to death. If you look at all of the villains post 1989, you see a lot of repeats. Just counting live action films, it's 5 Jokers, 3 Catwomen, 2 Riddlers, 3 Harvey's Dent, 2 Banes, 2 Penguins, 2 Falcones, 2 Maronis. Then, for only 1 portrayal, you have Ra's al Ghul, Scarecrow, Max Schreck, Talia, Poison Ivy, Harley, Calendar Man, Deathstroke, Deadshot, KG Beast, and Mr. Freeze. So Mr. Freeze is surely due before Bane or Two-Face. Number 4, cool character design. Batman and Robin character design, while something, does not really seem like the best we can do with a man in a scary cryo suit. Don't get me wrong, it had moth wings, and it is an improvement on the Batman 66 Freeze costume, but there's definitely room for improvement here too. And the Reeves team has done a great job so far of reinventing the looks of classic characters to fit into the noir Gotham aesthetic. So it would be interesting to see how they make someone like Mr. Freeze fit into that universe. Number 5, the ice gun is cool. And more specifically, I think a lot of audiences are interested to see Reeves' take on the metahuman Batman villains. So Freeze might be a good place to start. He's got a simple, scientific-ish basis for his powers that would not feel too out of place in the world Reeves has created, and he could act as an entry point for more extreme metahuman villains like Ivy or Clayface. Number 5, Gotham Central comic rules. I want to throw this out there if you haven't read it before. Gotham Central by Ed Brubaker and Michael Lark is an exploration of the Gotham City villains through the lens of a street-level cop. Sure, it is scary for Batman to fight someone like Mr. Freeze, but can you imagine trying to deal with Mr. Freeze as just a guy, not prepared for him? And he can completely freeze you, killing you instantly and leaving behind what is essentially a statue? That is pretty crazy. And Freeze is the villain who opens that story. So seeing that kind of take on Freeze could be fun. But all that being said, why now? Why is Mr. Freeze the best villain for this point in Bruce's journey? I do not see a reason. Freeze is all about revenge, as he loves to say.
And cold, like the swift hand of vengeance.
Freeze is a dispassionate revenge machine. So he would exist as a foil to Batman in a movie where Batman needs to learn that vengeance is not the way to solve problems, and Batman needs to stand for something more. And we just did that movie. Riddler was all about vengeance, and Batman and Riddler had that we're not so different chat that spells it out. So I don't see Freeze as the next step in this character's development. But maybe there's another reason people love Freeze. It isn't just Mr. Freeze that the people want anyway. They specifically want Giancarlo Esposito as Mr. Freeze. Again, I've seen it in all the fan art, and I cannot deny that Giancarlo Esposito would make a fantastic Mr. Freeze. So maybe it all comes down to Giancarlo Esposito is in his prime. Let's get him in one of these as a villain. And hey, Mr. Freeze is good fit. Esposito could do cold, calculating, single-minded, threatening, in a way that few actors these days can. But, and hear me out, I love Esposito, but I not only don't think Mr. Freeze is an interesting pick here, I think there's another villain that works well with Esposito's skill set who we have not seen in a film before. And he could be a great foil for Bruce at this point in his life. And his name is Hugo Strange. So here's the plan. I want to talk about Hugo Strange, what's his deal in the comics, why do I think he's the best villain for Bruce to face off against now, and then what does that movie look like? Who is Hugo Strange? Hugo Strange has been around for a while. He made his first appearance in Detective Comics number 36, all the way back in February of 1940. That is a month before The Joker, which makes Hugo Strange the first recurring Batman villain ever. Naturally, his characterization has changed a lot over time. He's gone from being a random fog-based criminal to super genius, super scientist. But he dies a lot, so he gets a do-over every time. Hugo Strange started out as an evil genius, akin to a Lex Luthor or a Baron Zemo. He commanded a small team of thugs with whom Strange would rob banks. He made fog machines and even engineered monster men, but alas, those were all distractions for bank robberies. Eventually, he was killed, and that was that. Until it turned out he was not killed and actually just went somewhere else for a while. Strange does this a lot. Strange took a gap year criming around Europe and came up with a new scheme. He would trick wealthy Gothamites into believing he was a miracle doctor who could cure them of any ailment. Except instead of that, he mutated them into monster men. Strange loves monster men. When Bruce comes to Strange, who goes by Mr. Todd Hunter now, things get interesting because besides being Batman's first recurring villain, Hugo Strange holds another comic distinction. He is the first villain to deduce Batman's secret identity. Strange takes this information and attempts to auction it off to a group of super criminals. One of them, Rupert Thorne, ends up capturing Strange and attempts to beat the information out of him, but Strange suffers injuries during the beating and Hugo Strange was killed, and that was that. Until It turned out Hugo Strange was so good at yoga that he only appeared dead but was actually alive. It was then that Strange got his best idea yet. He knows who Batman is, so if he attacked Bruce Wayne, he could defeat the Batman and then take his place. Strange could be the new Batman, which, okay, dude, sure. But the plan fails and Strange blows up a replica of Wayne Manor that he is in. And Hugo Strange was killed, and that was that. Until. Okay, I think this is the last time that happens. It turns out Strange actually used something called a mandroid to fake his own death. Fancy that. Now he's coming back like a regular rogue, trying to take the place of Batman by defeating Bruce Wayne and failing. But this is all pre-crisis Hugo Strange, which means it takes place before the 1986 DC Comics event, which rebooted the franchise named Crisis on Infinite Earths. Post-Crisis, we get a new Strange that's more in line with what I am interested in. This Strange is an evil psychologist who profiles Batman for the police and becomes obsessed with discovering Batman's true secret identity. When he does eventually learn that Batman is Bruce Wayne, he tries to destroy Batman and take his place by slandering Batman to the press and even staging some crimes done by people in batsuits. This eventually fails, and oh look, here we are again. Strange falls into a river and dies, and that's the end of that. Until he's just back, and then he runs through various schemes that each attempt to kill Bruce Wayne and take his place. Then we have our second franchise-wide reboot, New 52, and nothing too interesting happens here. But the third franchise-wide reboot, Rebirth, has one more big Strange story up its sleeve. Hugo Strange goes back to his making big monster men roots. Strange then dresses up like Batman and forces Batman to prove that Strange is the better Batman. Then Strange explodes. I'm sure he's fine. I also want to bring up Strange's appearance in two other pieces of Bat media. Even though he has been in the animated series, he was in the Batman show that everyone kind of likes now. I mean, I think we all liked it, but now we're like, man, that show was good. And that theme song was fun. The Edge from U2, for some reason, is the guy who made that. I don't know. But two other pieces of media. First, Strange is the antagonist in Arkham City. Until he isn't. Honestly, it's quite a shame, because he built Arkham City, and the trailers suggested that Strange would be pulling the strings, but just when you get to Strange, he is killed by Ra's al Ghul. Also, Joker's the real bad guy anyway. The story of that game is excellent, but I do think they could have afforded to save Strange for Arkham Knight or something like that, since he's teamed up with Scarecrow in the past. And I also don't think Ra's al Ghul really needed to be in that game. It kind of felt weird. He was living in like the sewers underneath Arkham City and like had a team of ninjas down there. It just felt like we were cramming all the Batman stories together, and it was like, this could be a different game. Anyway, and then B.D. Wong played Strange on Gotham. Honestly, I have not seen it, but I've heard good things. It seems like they went in the direction I would like to see here. Strange was the chief psychologist at Arkham, spent time psychoanalyzing the villains and getting under their skin, and he made monster men. I could see that kind of characterization working here. So what are the essential characteristics of Hugo Strange? I believe he is best served as some sort of psychiatrist, perhaps at Arkham, who is obsessed with Batman. I love the motif of Strange dressing up like Batman and wanting to take his place. This is the one thing Giancarlo Esposito probably can't do, but I do still think that's a fun idea for Strange in general. And then Strange loves to experiment on people and turn them into big monster men. Now you may see some of those answers dangling here, but I do want to ask the question, why is Hugo Strange the best villain for Bruce to face off against right now? First, let's talk about where Batman is. At the end of The Batman, Bruce decides to redefine himself. Instead of being vengeance, he's going to be a symbol of hope to inspire the people. I like a villain who can challenge that. Ask Bruce, is that really what you want? Force Bruce to figure out why he's being Batman. Because this Batman has been very reactive. Batman is a reaction to his parents' murder. But now that Bruce is done with vengeance for his parents, I think Bruce needs to figure out what he wants, why he is doing this, and what he is trying to accomplish. Strange is a great villain here because he can literally ask Bruce that question. I could see a trailer, like the Arkham City trailer, narrated by Strange talking to Bruce, just asking him questions. Like, you say you want to be a symbol of hope. You want to move beyond vengeance. But what is the Batman, if not vengeance? Because this sequel needs to explore the relationship between Bruce and Batman. Throughout The Batman, characters commented on how Bruce is not doing enough as Bruce Wayne, not living a life, not giving back to the city. And it certainly seems like at the end of The Batman, Bruce has decided to put more work into being Bruce Wayne. So it would be very fun to pit him against a villain who wants to use the Bruce Wayne against the Batman. Take this vulnerability and exploit it. And what better villain to independently ascertain Batman's identity than the first one to do it in the comics, Hugo Strange. But then the big reason I think Strange is a uniquely qualified figure to lead this outing. What threads are left to pull? What plot elements did the Batman set up that may be interesting to explore further? For me, it's all Arkham. First off, we already have Joker in there, and now Riddler. Something's gotta give. We need to look at what purpose Arkham serves and why. And Strange can be driving that machine. Who else could keep Joker and Riddler in check? And perhaps when Strange is defeated in the end, maybe that gives Joker the opportunity to escape Arkham and make moves in the sequel. And yes, current Warner Brother executive, I know that you guys are currently developing multiple spin-offs that sometimes seem to morph into other ones. Like I know there was a Gotham PD one that might be the Penguin one now, and I think there was some sort of Arkham one, and who knows what that's going to be. And there may be an impulse to put Hugo Strange into the Arkham one, because he could work at Arkham. In this pitch, he will. But the thing with Hugo Strange is, unless Batman is in that story, I don't see a point. A lot of these Batman villains, like Mr. Freeze, or Catwoman, or Penguin, exist independently of Batman. Mr. Freeze just wants to steal diamonds and cure his wife. Batman gets in the way, he fights Batman, they have a relationship, but it comes from that. Hugo Strange is obsessed with Batman, he wants to take Batman's place, he is obsessed with Bruce Wayne. Like, the interesting things about Hugo Strange are all about his relationship to Batman. So I think Hugo Strange would be pretty underserved if he's just the protagonist in this Arkham show and never interacts with Batman in a meaningful way. And I imagine Robert Pattinson Batman is not going to be in this show. But my favorite detail about Arkham in The Batman is something I don't think I've ever seen handled this way in other Bat media. Bruce's mother, Martha, was in Arkham. She's from one of the great families of Gotham, like the Waynes. And Bruce's mother apparently had some sort of breakdown that forced her to be institutionalized. What sort of breakdown? Unclear. And we can figure that out. I just think that this Martha Arkham plotline is too interesting to not be explored in The Batman movie. Now let's be super clear here. This movie's tricky. Any modern Batman movie that dives into the psyches of his characters is difficult to write. You don't want the mentally ill to be characterized as evil in every situation. Sure, some of the villains like Riddler or Joker or even Strange exhibit obsessive tendencies, and there really aren't any Batman villains without some sort of mental health related issue. It comes up a lot, usually because of Arkham. So if we throw in other villains who are characterized as dangerous because they are mentally ill, you maybe want to look at that idea and use this movie to break that down. Why are they treated that way? And how are the real villains in society using them to get what they want? It would need to be handled by someone smarter than I am, but again, this is the pitch, big picture. The details are where you need a professional to get this right, but I believe it can be done, especially if the real monster is always Hugo Strange. But okay, that's the explanation. Here's what the movie would look like. I'm thinking we start a few years later. Batman rescued everyone from the floods, he is seen as a hero, and has made some collars and new enemies since then. At the same time, Bruce Wayne has made more of an effort to get involved, helping the mayor, philanthropy, advocacy. He's doing pretty well, and one of the organizations he is championing is a rehabilitation of Arkham Asylum. Make it more friendly, focused on healing. After all, his mom's name is on the building. This should be important to Bruce. He can be there at some ceremony giving a speech saying like, "Years ago, the Riddler exposed my family's dark secret. My mother had a breakdown and was institutionalized here at Arkham Asylum. It was something my father was ashamed of, enough to work with terrible people to cover up, but he was wrong. We all were. My mother was in crisis, and she needed somewhere where she could be treated with compassion. And we need to build a society where someone can get the help they need without showing up on the front page of the Gazette. That's why I am working with my great uncle Jeremiah Arkham and Warden Quincy Sharp to turn Arkham into a place Gotham City can be proud of." He gets some questions. What about the Riddler? Can he be reformed? I don't think anyone is beyond saving. I'm sure they will try their hardest to reach Mr. Nashton. And then someone else says, what about the Batman? This is, what about him? You guys making a special cell for him where he can hang upside down? I think that's enough questions for today. Thank you all so much. And then he leaves. And we see, watching the conference from his office, the head psychiatrist, Hugo Strange. He pauses his live stream of the event and stares at Bruce, perplexed, but forming an idea. As Batman, Bruce is dealing with the Gotham crime. He takes down some thugs, and as he's cuffing one of them, they mention that they don't want to go back to Arkham. It's a nightmare in there. Bruce doesn't think too much of it, but he is concerned. The next day, Bruce meets with new district attorney Harvey Dent to work on some proposals for prison reform, specifically looking at Arkham. Bruce is getting some pushback from inside of Arkham and he can't figure out how to move forward. You gotta introduce Harvey here, even if he doesn't go Two-Face in this movie or even the next one. It is so much fun to build that relationship between Bruce and Harvey, knowing that it's eventually going to turn into a tragic rivalry. I think you could make the case that Two-Face is the second best Batman villain behind Kite Man, and I think Harvey Dent is the glue that holds the Dark Knight together. Sure, Heath Ledger's Joker is amazing, but Aaron Eckhart's Dent is so confident and principled, you totally believe he is all in on being a good guy and fixing Gotham. That movie does not work without him. And I think one thing we can add here is have Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne get along. No love triangle, no Bruce pretending to be a playboy. At this point, Harvey and Bruce both see in each other a genuine passion for Gotham and justice. So they get along. Maybe they go out and get drinks. I don't know. It's been so long. What do people do together for fun? Like backgammon? Some of that. But Harvey does say that one name keeps coming up when he asks about Gotham. Hugo Strange. Next night, we get some Batmaning. And there are reports of well, this can't be right, some sort of Batman. But Bruce is not anywhere near the Gotham Observatory. It must be a mistake. Or maybe some kids dressed up as Batman. Happens every so often. But then Batman hears on the radio two cops talking about this Batman, and they get massacred. So Bruce goes to check it out. And that's where we get introduced to our first bad guy, Man-Bat. Why not? He's fun. The big old Man-Bat guy. He's terrifying. He could set up a fun aerial fight scene. Hopefully, Bruce has upped his game since that time he crashed face first into a bridge and then broke every bone in his body. I mean, hit his head and got some bruises. He doesn't need to be Iron Man, but some high-flying action is always fun. Bruce has a tussle with Man-Bat, but Man-Bat wrecks his equipment, like a glider, grappling hook, wingsuit, whatever, and Man-Bat escapes. Bruce does not have any clues to who or what this creature is, except he did manage to pull something off the creature's ankle, a medical tag from a patient named R. Langstrom, and Bruce turns the tag over to reveal that Langstrom came from Arkham Asylum. Bruce is confused. Arkham doesn't have metahumans like this. He talks to Alfred about it, who tells Bruce that there isn't much he can do about it during the day. Besides, bats are nocturnal, so he probably won't be seeing this Man-Bat until tomorrow night anyway. But Bruce Wayne could certainly pay Arkham a visit as a concerned citizen / benefactor. The next day, Bruce visits Arkham, talks to Warden Sharp about some plans for the renovation, and during his tour of the new wing, they run into Hugo Strange. Sharp introduces Strange, a world-renowned psychologist who joined Arkham a couple of years back, to help analyze some of the supervillains like Joker and Riddler. Bruce recognizes the name and can tell something is off with Strange. Strange gives Bruce his business card, says if Bruce has any questions about the asylum to give Strange a call. And Bruce notices some papers in Strange's hands, files for different patients, and the one on top is for an R. Langstrom. Now Bruce knows Strange is involved, so he plans to sneak into the office later that night to see what he can dig up. Later that day, Bruce gets dinner with Harvey to talk about this, but Harvey brings an old friend from law school, a woman named Silver St. Cloud. Harvey is trying to set Bruce and Silver up. Neither is thrilled, and Bruce is busy, so he needs to brush Silver off. Harvey assumes Bruce left because he felt ambushed and feels bad. So now that tension is different. This Bruce Wayne does want to be Bruce Wayne and Batman, but he can't do both things at once. Before, we just had a Bruce Wayne who had given up on Bruce Wayne, 100% in on Batman. This one's not quite there. And we don't need to see Silver St. Cloud again. That is just a pretty obscure Batman love interest who I think is fun to bring up here. The last time I heard about her was in that comic where they fought Elmer Fudd. That night, Bruce sneaks into the office of Hugo Strange, has a conversation over his headset with Alfred that he wouldn't normally break into confidential patient information like this, but he doesn't have a choice. Plus, Langstrom is in danger, and Alfred is monitoring police scanners to see if he hears any chatter about this Man-Bat. This is where things get interesting. Bruce sneaks in through the open window, finds a file on Strange's desk, looks into it a little bit, learns that Langstrom was a scientist working on a cure for deafness that used bat DNA. finds out Langstrom has a childhood home he talks about a lot in therapy, and as Bruce leaves, we see that he has been watched the entire time by a camera in the office. So Bruce tracks down the abandoned house on the outskirts of Gotham and finds Man-Bat. At this point, Langstrom is turning back from bat to man. It's disgusting. His body is not taking the transformation well. He's having serious heart palpitations. Langstrom asks Batman for help and says some sort of cryptic something before he dies in Batman's arms. I haven't figured it out yet, but it'll come into play later. Gordon arrives minutes later, because Bruce called him, and Gordon and Bruce talk about Langstrom. He's being treated at Arkham for some sort of psychosis, but something must have been going on. Gordon tells Batman that, yeah, Arkham has a history of corruption going back to its founding, but never anything like this. How was Langstrom even able to do his experiments while in Arkham? Like, I guess maybe he escaped and went to his lab, but why leave the Arkham tag on his ankle at all? The first thing you do is rip that off. Something is rotten at Arkham, and Bruce and Gordon are gonna figure out what. The next day, Gordon goes to Arkham himself to investigate Langstrom, does some research, and finds that Langstrom was reported missing 3 days ago, but somehow the police department was not notified of this. Suspicious. Warden Sharp assures Gordon that it was all misunderstanding. Gordon asks Strange what he knew about Langstrom. Strange tells Gordon, I can't get into too much detail, I'm sure you understand. I will say, Langstrom is a very troubled man, but a talented biologist. Suffered from schizophrenic episodes related to bats. I think he believed through some sort of genetic augmentation he could become one. Can't imagine where he got that idea. Accusing Gordon of working too closely with Batman. That night, Batman follows up with Strange. Goes to his office again to look for clues to what Strange is really up to. And this is where Batman and Strange first meet. This is a super important scene. Strange has a device that makes a high-pitched sound which scrambles recording hardware, so Batman cannot record the conversation, and Batman is disconnected from Alfred. And Strange tells Batman the whole thing. You freed Langstrom. Why? Well, I needed something to get your attention. Not everyone has a fancy bat signal. Some of us need to improvise. Well, now you have me. What do you want? To talk. You know, Batman, I'm from Gotham. Grew up a block from Robinson Park. And when I got my doctorate, I came right back here. Worked at Arkham. In fact, one of my first patients was Martha Wayne, going through a terrible spell. Full mental breakdown. I'm sure you saw it was in all the papers thanks to the Riddler. But that's not the whole story. She was delusional. Believed she was an angel sent to rid the world of evil, the poor woman. She was heavily medicated and sent on her way, but I never forgot Martha Wayne. And neither did you. What are you saying? Give me a break. You can't expect me to believe I'm the first person who figured it out. Bruce? How? I saw in you what I saw long ago in her. The delusion. But this is another level. When? I had my suspicions, but I wasn't sure until the press conference. What I can't understand is the why. And I fight to keep the streets safe so no one will have to suffer the same fate as I did. Sure, that's the simple answer, but why? Why the cape, the pointy ears, the symbol? It's a lot of choices, Bruce. If you tell people who I am and ruin this fascinating example of psychosis in action, oh, no. Then what do you want? I want to learn. Who are you? Really? With some tests. Tests? Yes, you see, after the Langstrom breakout, I recommended we transfer some of our more dangerous patients to Blackgate until we could ensure their safety here. I think your friend Gordon even volunteered to lead the transfer. What? He didn't tell you? Must want to keep his distance. It's a shame because when I deactivate this silencer, you'll be getting a call from your assistant telling you that there has been a terrible accident and 3 of the most dangerous criminals in Gotham have escaped. All you need to do is find them. Why are you doing this? Consider me curious. Why is the Batman? You won't tell me the truth. I'm not even sure you know yourself. But I have a feeling you'll show me. The escaped patients. You want my files? Of course. I made you copies. Bruce gets ready to exit. Once I stop them, I'm coming for you. You know where to find me. And then Batman leaves. And this is the movie. Bruce does not have any information that can tie Strange directly to the breakout, so he needs to catch the escaped patients as well as figure out what Strange is really up to. But Batman cannot let Strange off the hook, and since Gordon ends up hospitalized after the breakout, Batman is forced to call on Harvey to help him stop Strange. And this is the first time Batman and Harvey have met or spoken. But Batman explains the situation to Harvey, and Harvey is in. He's going to do his best to figure out what is going on at Arkham and see if he can pin this on Strange. So what patients do I want to use? I have a few. And in keeping with Strange's goal of psychoanalyzing Batman, they each represent some part of Batman that Strange is curious about. He assumes that by forcing Batman to confront these people specifically, it will reveal something about Batman. First up, Killer Croc, Waylon Jennings, man with the skin condition, but also now is a huge monster man, thanks to experiments or genetics, it's unclear. Croc and Batman are both urban legends who live in darkness. Croc because he was cast out by society for looking different, and Batman maybe for the same reasons. He believes he has the same ugliness in his mind, and because of that, cannot really fit in as Bruce Wayne. Fight-wise, we should get a fun Arkham Asylum-style scene in the sewer, where Croc is swimming just under the water and stalking Batman, and when Batman stops Croc, he realizes that Croc was also suffering from some delusions and memory loss, so part of why he was giving Batman such a hard time had to do with the fact that he didn't really know what was going on. The second escaped patient I want is one I was not originally super familiar with, who calls herself White Rabbit. She is a woman with the ability to create a single clone of herself. Outside of that, she's not a big player in the comics. She dresses like a Playboy bunny, which we can probably ignore here, and that means we get to give her a backstory that's new for this movie. So let's say her background is that she's a former geneticist who was working on cloning technology, was accidentally exposed to something that gave her the ability to duplicate herself. I love White Rabbit here because her superpower is essentially creating a second personality, and perhaps Strange theorizes that Batman and Bruce are multiple distinct personalities, like a Mark Spector-Stephen Grant situation. So Strange sets Batman against White Rabbit as a way to see if Batman empathizes with her. The actual confrontation can be kinda anywhere. It's always nice to have a fun Hall of Mirrors fight, have Batman stumbling through a series of warped reflections. It's on the nose, but that's Batman after all. And then the third escaped patient would be another recent addition to Batman's rogues gallery, a scientist named Lonzo Valentine, who goes by the alias Professor Pig. Pig is perfect for this kind of story. He is a schizophrenic scientist who believes that people are imperfect and need to be constantly improved. The name Pig, P-Y-G, comes from the mythological figure Pygmalion, a sculptor who sees everyone as imperfect and unable to find a lover who can meet his impossibly high standards. Pygmalion sculpts a marble statue of a woman who is so perfect that Pygmalion falls in love with the statue. And after some intervention from a goddess, the statue comes to life, and she and Pygmalion live happily ever after. Professor Pig usually works like your typical psychotic film serial killer. He kidnaps people, frequently women, and performs plastic surgery on his victims. This usually results in the victims being lobotomized or brainwashed and turns them into Pig's henchmen known as Dollatrons, or just dolls. Pig and Batman share an obsessive perfectionism. Bruce, the victim of a childhood tragedy, believes it is his responsibility to purify Gotham by patrolling the streets as the Batman and stopping crime. It is an unachievable goal, like finding or creating the perfect person, and sometimes drives Bruce to what some people would see as madness. This is Strange's assessment of Bruce, and forcing Bruce to confront Pig shows him what he can become if he loses himself to the Batman. The fight can take place in an abandoned hospital. Pig captures a victim or two, begins working on him. Bruce tracks down Pig and stops him. And all throughout these missions, Bruce is being called by Strange, who talks Bruce through his assessment. It's like an evil live therapy session. And Bruce realizes that all these interactions between Batman and the escaped prisoners are being recorded by Strange, which means Strange knew the patients would end up in those locations. And Bruce can tell from the files Strange gave him that in their sessions, Strange was manipulating each patient and subconsciously directing them to those locations. And that's something that I think is really important. While these escaped patients are obviously dangerous, Strange is the real villain. I feel like we maybe got a little too comfortable in most comic media, but especially in the case of Batman, with demonizing characters suffering from all kinds of mental illness. It's a meme at this point. Billionaire dresses up like a bat to beat up mentally ill clowns. Like, look at Riddler, Scarecrow, obviously Joker, Two-Face, Mad Hatter, it's like half of them. And I'm not saying all Professor Pig needs is a hug, but I think it's important here to stress that the patients are not the problem. The problem is Arkham, and to a larger extent, the healthcare system that has failed them, represented in this instance by Strange. They are treated as guinea pigs to be experimented on when they're valuable and discarded when they're not. And I would love that to be the big lesson Bruce learns throughout the movie after interacting with Croc, Rabbit, Pig, and even Man-Bat. Strange uses all of them and has made everything worse, and Batman wonders what Strange gets out of this. Why these three? And why is he so obsessed with Batman? And that is your end of Act 2 reveal. Hugo Strange is not just messing with these patients for fun. 3 of the 4 are former doctors and scientists with specializations in biology and genetics, and Croc is a man with a skin condition who was mutated into a giant crocodile monster. We can check back with Harvey, who has been researching Strange at the hospital and is now kidnapped by Strange and held in an Arkham cell. Strange tells Batman that he recently met with a friend who isn't feeling well and Batman should come take a look. Now, Harvey is in danger of being mutilated by Strange, but we still haven't answered the big question. What does Hugo Strange want? What's his deal? Well, he wants control, wants to be able to run Arkham the way he sees fit. Strange is using the asylum to conduct experiments. Strange wants to study the limits of humanity, what separates us from monsters, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stuff. Part of that research involves using experimental biology and genetics and all kinds of stuff to see if he can turn people into monsters. Bruce reforming Arkham makes this difficult, so Strange is trying to get Bruce out of the way. But why not just kill Bruce? Strange seems to be able to, especially since he knows that Bruce is the Batman. And that is Strange's weakness. At the same time, Strange hates Bruce Wayne, but Strange is fascinated by Batman. Strange needs to see the Batman in action. A man who has somehow managed to sit on the razor's edge between being a man and being a monster. And Strange wants to figure out how, what trauma or experiences set him on this path. So Strange devises a plan to both psychoanalyze Batman and get him killed. And if Strange's patients don't kill Batman, then Strange will. And that's your finale. Bruce goes to Arkham, saves Harvey, and defeats Strange. Perhaps Strange has some mutated henchmen that Strange can use to fight Batman, and Batman beats them by using some chemical against him that he only now realizes are what Langstrom's last words were before he died. I haven't figured out what those are yet, but something. Strange dies, Arkham saved, Bruce successfully reforms Arkham because, again, I think one of the problems with a movie like this is I don't want to demonize therapy or psychiatry as a profession, and we can tie this whole thing up in a bow by giving Bruce another press conference where he talks about the value of Arkham, the value of believing in reforming these people and helping these people. Bruce gives a speech in front of Arkham, says, Hugo Strange was a dangerous man. He exploited the people in this asylum that needed help the most. This movie is about Bruce figuring out what this new Batman is without vengeance. Is it hope? Is it justice? Is it compassion? Can he break the cycle of Arkham churning out villains? Can Bruce fix his family's biggest mistake so he can move on and start his own Bat family? And yeah, this would set up The Batman 3 with Two-Face and Robin. So in conclusion, Warner Brothers executive, I think we need to go in a Strange direction. Take some of Batman's more fun, monstery villains and use them to focus on Batman's relationship with horror and Arkham. It will make lots of money and also be good. And WB Executive, I know you love these videos, they're fun for you and me, the two people that watch them, but I want to share a secret with you and only you. I don't make all this fancy B-roll footage and music and flashy graphics myself. I use this video sponsor, Storyblocks. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, why would you sponsor this pitch? And it's like, I don't know, I just did. Storyblocks has a humongous library with 4K and HD stock footage, Premiere and After Effects templates, music, images, sound effects, and so much more. Truly, it is everything you need in one place. I'm sure you saw my motion graphics in this video, and that is barely scratching the surface. I was also able to use some of their stock footage for shots of things like Arkham. They have flexible subscriptions, so you can get a plan that works for what you need without worrying about budgets. Seriously, check out Storyblocks and sign up for their unlimited access plan at storyblocks.com/Nando and start making cool videos. So if this were somehow to end up on YouTube, which it definitely shouldn't, thank you everybody who supports the channel on Patreon, everybody who watches my videos on Nebula, everybody who listens to my podcast, mostly Nitpicking, everybody who follows me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. I'm Nando V Movies everywhere. That's all I got. I'll see you next time.